Good morning.
I've got one, but I think it was so easy. And the APS was from a
Good morning. Steve?
Hello.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks.
We just have one person from your company there today?
I have Derek Smith with me also.
Oh, okay. My name is Steve. I'll be doing the training with you this morning. We're going to go over some basics with setting up microcell and prerequisites. If at any point you have any questions, then just stop me and ask them, because I want to make sure you take away the information you need from this. Okay?
All right. Yep, that's fine.
Do you have any questions before we start?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, the first thing that we're going to talk about are the prerequisites for microcell. I'm not sure what operating systems you guys are familiar with, but as far as operating systems and processor speed and things like that, that's what we're going to talk about first.
Okay.
We want to stay PCI compliant with operating systems, and for the most part that means once Microsoft stops putting out updates and security patches, that operating system is not so much bad, just no longer compliant because it's not getting patched with any new security vulnerability fixes. So that kind of draws the line around Windows 2000. We want the operating systems to be newer than that. So XP Pro and the Windows embedded versions of XP Pro, WePOS and POS ready. Server 2003 and up, Server 2008, Server Foundation, Windows 7 is working fine. We've kind of skipped over Windows Vista. We have some dealers who've used. Say that again?
Like the rest of the world?
Good. Yeah, so I don't have to explain too much why then. We have some people using it on back offices because that's just what they could buy at the time, and so Vista Business seems to work okay, but we skip over it whenever possible. And version 8 of microcell, what we're the current releases now are compatible with 64-bit and 32-bit operating systems, so all that is good. We also avoid home operating systems for the most part. It was a bigger issue in the past with sharing and networking and the complexities involved there with home operating systems, but it's not so much as big of a deal now. We just try and avoid it because it's not really designed for the business atmosphere. So unless it's going to be like a single terminal install, then it won't really matter at all. As far as processor and memory, we want to make sure we have at least a 1.6 gig processor, these fanless Atom processors. That's kind of the minimum we want to see, because anything slower than that and you will see the screens kind of paint slowly and fill buttons a little bit more, it'll be more noticeable. So we want people to be impressed with the software rather than think, oh, that's running kind of slow. So we recommend, go ahead.
I don't think we'll have a problem with that because every implementation that we're planning will be on new hardware with, a minimum of Core 2 Duo dual core with 3-4 gigs of RAM in every computer. So I don't think performance will be an issue.
Good. And yeah, so that skips over really the memory requirements for the hard drive. Any new hard drive is going to be big enough to hold anything for microcell. The only thing I say about hard drives for people who are buying server, like true server computers with a server operating system, a lot of times they're partitioned with a small C drive. So sometimes I'll recommend people maybe evaluate that before you start installing things and maybe make sure that the C drive has a pretty good sized partition, not like 10 or 12 gigs, because that can get filled up pretty easily just installing programs. Then as far as peripheral devices, printers and whole displays and things like that, for the most part, microcell uses keyboard wedge emulation input devices. So the magnetic card readers, the barcode scanners need to be keyboard wedge emulation. They can still connect to, via USB, And then as far as printers, microcell can print to parallel, serial, USB, and Ethernet printers. We prefer to use parallel printers for receipt printers whenever the terminals have parallel ports, but since that's becoming a little bit outdated anymore, USB and Ethernet are our next favorite printers. We try and avoid serial printers just because serial ports aren't the best at sending data. Because it sends it a little bit slower, sometimes it can truncate large print jobs unless the printer has a built-in extra memory buffer and other things like that that just add more money to the printer costs. So we do have a lot of dealers who still use serial printers, and that's fine. We just are a little bit more limited with the functionality of the serial printers. Any questions about specific peripheral devices?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think the Dell stuff that we're ordering, do they still have parallel ports on? Or are they mostly USB? They're all USB now, so I guess we would be using the USB printers.
Yeah, Dell has plenty of USB ports usually on their computers.
Right. Yeah, usually it's 6 around the back.
There's just a few things that would have to be serial if we were going to connect them. So there's like we have an interface to an electronic scale for places that want to sell things by weight. That has to be a serial device right now.
Okay.
What was the other one? So there's just a few things that, you may need at least one serial port, and I think Dell computers generally come with at least one, so you'd probably be okay there.
We wouldn't need anything to be weighed. It's basically a pizza chain that we would be installing to. So
okay. Okay.
Ordering, that kind of thing.
Okay. And then as far as video cards, if the computers have a video card that with drivers that supports an extended desktop, we can do some different things in microcell. We can use a second video display to show marketing kind of screen slideshow images, like their menu boards or pictures of their beautiful food that makes you hungry. While you're not ringing up orders, that's one thing we can do. Or in a drive-through, we can actually kind of make a really low-cost drive-through board using that extended display. So some things there to keep in mind, if you have a video card that supports that, which again, the Dell computers, if they're new, will all support that, I'm sure.
Okay.
And then the last kind of thing about all the prerequisites we'll talk about is Windows networking. You guys probably have some experience with Windows networking. It sounds like you're familiar with computers.
Yeah.
So, we have a lot of dealers that come up from selling just cash registers, so Windows is a little bit new to them, so they struggle with some of the things. But, yeah, the only thing I'm going to say about the Windows networking is try and avoid daisy chaining some devices like switches and routers, whenever possible. Keep all of the microcell computers connected to the same switch or router because it will speed up their communication with each other. We tend to use designated IP addresses a lot because it will speed up the terminals logging into Windows when they restart. And that's that. So any questions about the requirements or anything like that, the environment for Windows?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we'll run into any problems with that. It's all going to be Windows 7 Pro on a nicely spec machine on every computer we install microcell onto.
Okay, good. The next thing we're going to talk about, I'm going to exit out of here, is the installation tools that we're going to provide to you. Have you received a dealer packet with a flash drive, installation files on the flash drive?
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
But I couldn't swear to it.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is we'll be sending you a flash drive, and you can either order this flash drive when you place orders for the customers, or you can use a CD if you'd rather use a CD. A lot of these terminals don't have CD-ROMs in them anymore, so we give you that choice. But what we put on the flash drive, if you'll see here on the screen, this is going to be everything that we're going to include on the flash drive, and what we're going to recommend is that you take this flash drive and copy the contents to every terminal you install microcell on. That way you don't have to worry about where's the CD or the flash drive. You have all the tools available on every terminal. If the terminal goes down, you need to reinstall that same version on a new system for them and you don't know where the CD or the flash drive is, you can get it from one of the other terminals. On the contents that we're going to go over here, we've got first folder is third-party applications. Most of these things are available on the internet. We just put them here so that if you don't have internet access when you're setting up a computer, you can get things started and installed. Adobe Flash, Reader. Our documents are in PDF format on here, so that gives you Adobe Reader to install. There's an atomic clock. If the computer's not keeping good time, you can install that. DataCap folder is the initial installation for our NetEPay credit card interface. You guys have particular credit card processors you work with?
I don't know, since we're kind of like a third party for this.
Okay.
The chain we're still in the process of learning about what exactly they're going to do with that.
Okay. We have a couple different interfaces. We have a couple direct interfaces to processors, which doesn't require any additional hardware or software, so those are, of course, the easiest to set up. But we can interface with all nationwide industry standard platforms for processing credit cards through NetEPay. So we'll talk more about that as that comes into play. And then we use two programs for remote support. We use a program called TeamViewer to connect from outside to our customers, and then we use VNC to connect from one terminal to another within the system. So once we connect with TeamViewer from outside, then we can use VNC to go from terminal to terminal. So are you familiar with either of those programs?
VNC, TeamViewer, does that kind of work in a similar way to like LogMeIn?
Similar. It's a little bit simpler. Basically, there's just a client that runs on one side that's waiting for the connection. It has an ID number that they provide to the support technician who's going to be connecting, and then a password. And the only requirements here are that both computers are connected to the internet. There's no port enablement. You don't have to enable any ports in the router or anything like that. So we've just discovered it's very simple for our end users who are not computer literate to be able to help us get connected and fix their problems. So it just requires that internet connection. The TeamViewer, the pricing for that is the way they handle their licensing. You buy a license for connecting out, and you can add additional concurrent channels for it. So it just kind of depends. They have a free version, but it only lasts about 5 minutes to connect with. So LogMeIn is also a good solution too. All those are fine. I have a documents folder. Again, we have the documents in PDF format. Our manual is kind of modular like this, so that if we make a change to one section, we can just send out those changes like that. Or if you need to print a section, you can just print one small section without having to print the whole thing. We also have some quick reference documents that are kind of grouped here in different sections. They're mostly like single-page or two-page step-by-step how to set things up, some examples on how to set up certain discounts and things like that. And then we also have some training videos, tutorial videos. They're like 1 or 2 minutes long that show you how to set up different functions and do different functions in microcell. We have a drivers and controls folder. It's just what it says, all the third-party drivers and controls, mostly printer drivers and other peripheral devices here. Graphics, we just include our graphics if people want to incorporate that into different things. And then we also have some different graphics for different functions in microcell. We have a kiosk configuration where the menu buttons are a little bit bigger than standard because the customers are ringing up their own order and paying for it at this kiosk terminal. So it's a little bit simpler menu with more pictures to help them make it through the order process without help from the employees. We have menu buttons that you can use to customize the pictures on the buttons, so they can have little pictures of the Coke and Pepsi and those different products. And then we have some graphics for our table layout interface, some different floor plans and different table styles so that they can kind of build their floor plan if they want to match the restaurant if it's a full-service restaurant. Windows components, again, it's just like the third party, except these are mostly Microsoft components available on the web, but we put them here just in case you don't have internet access when you're setting up the computer. So that's everything except for the install files. The install files is pretty much what it says there, everything you'll need to install microcell. What we have inside that folder, you'll see a go live that jumps up to the top because we surround it with $signs there. And this is going to have 2 self-extracting zip files that you can use to clear out the sales that you generate during the testing and training sessions. So once you're done with testing and training and they're ready to go live with the system, we run these files. It puts blank databases into the directory and overwrites all the sales that were generated during practice. So they don't have to worry about clearing that out before they go live. There's a separate one for time records because sometimes during training they're actually paying the people to be there, hopefully. So they may be using the time clock live already, so we don't want to erase that data at the same time. So if they're using the time clock live, we don't run that one. If they want to reset that data because they were practicing clocking in and out, they can reset that data also. We have a set of blank databases. It's just all the blank access databases, and there's some SQL databases that we have in here. So if you started by installing the demo on a computer, and now you want to start creating somebody's brand new menu from scratch, we can come in here and grab the menu databases, copy them into the microcell directory, and start from scratch. Or the same thing with the employees or any other files, you know, that once you're done with testing or setting something up if you want to reset it. The next folder is what we call DBase text files. All of these files have the extension DUD. Each one of these is a text file that shows us the structure of one of the fields in one of our databases. So there's a text file here for every field in our databases. And what happens is when we take these DUD files and put them into the microcell folder, when we start microcell, it looks for these files, and when it sees them, it opens each of the databases up and compares it to this structure in this text file. If any of the fields are not there in the database, it adds the field, leaving their current data alone. So this way, when we do upgrades and we add new fields in our databases to allow for new functionality, this is a way for us to add those fields to their existing databases without erasing any of their data. Now, we're going to skip down here to these install and upgrade folders because they kind of relate to this blank databases and DBase text files. You will generally see, and I'm going to delete these 2 for right now, an install folder and an upgrade folder with the same version number. They both will install the program and register all the components with Windows. The install will put in blank databases so that you can start setting up the system for live use. The upgrade does not put any blank databases in. Obviously, for upgrading, we don't want to erase their current data, so it will automatically put these database text files in with that DUD extension. So when you upgrade, you're going to copy in any new program files, register all those files, and then put these text files in that when you start microcell up right after that upgrade, it's going to automatically upgrade any of the databases that need to be upgraded. So the reason I bring that up this early is I want people to understand there's no advantage to running the install and then turning right around and running the upgrade unless you're trying to fix a file that didn't register with Windows or something like that. You're not going to get any newer functionality. You're just going to be making sure the databases are up to date. Install support, we have some different things that you may or may not need to use, kind of optional things. There's a way to do automatic patches with microcell, and there's a little instruction file in here. So if we're just doing a small patch from one version to another, we can set microcell to automatically pull these files from a shared location. So you can kind of update terminals a little bit more quickly than running an installation setup. We have some drink recipes already built in here if they're going to have a full bar. If we copy these files into the microcell directory, it allows them, makes them accessible to bartenders and cashiers and servers. They can pull these recipes up on screen. We don't automatically put them in because sometimes people's recipes are a little different than ours. So, and if it's not a full bar, they won't have liquor anyway. So we don't want to put information they don't need there. Microcell utilities, these are some different programs that we use. We will direct you here if you need to use any of these programs. They're kind of optional. There's some programs to check the padding outside of microcell, the communication between the terminals, different things like that. So you'll be on the phone with us, and we'll tell you that we have a little utility that'll fix this problem that you're having, and we'll tell you how to use it. And then we have a little screensaver program here that will, by default, just kind of float our logo around, but they can customize the logo to either the dealer or the end user if they want to put their own logos, just so it gives them something to float around on the screen there in the screensaver, so they don't have to burn anything into the monitor, and they don't have to use a real intensive screensaver. Some of these programs, like pictures or whatnot, can eat up some resources on the computers. All those are optional.
If they wanted to change that for their own logo, is that just replace a file in that folder or what?
It's very easy, and there's little instructions here that also tell them how to do it. All we do is create a bitmap, put it into the Windows directory where the screensaver is, and then we reference that bitmap here in this text file. So yeah, it's very simple to do.
Okay.
This interface install files is kind of similar. They're kind of optional modules or add-on modules for microcell. There's a MapQuest interface for printing directions for like pizza delivery restaurants. There's a SQL installation here in case you want to use SQL databases instead of Access databases for the sales information, and some different third-party interfaces here. The key drivers, microcell, when you install it, we will provide you with a hardware key and a software license file, and those two have to match up. So this is just the drivers for the hardware key. Some of this stuff is some legacy for other keys we've used. You'll just use this green pyramid install.exe, and when we run this, it will come up and ask you what type of key you're using. We will mostly provide you with USB keys. It will give you a message not to attach that USB key until this driver is installed, because otherwise Windows will try and make it into a flash drive and it won't function as a key dongle. We do begin installation. Takes just a few seconds. It will give you a successful message. And then you can attach the key. When you attach the key, it will bring the Windows Found New Hardware wizard up, and you just next through all that with the default settings, and then it'll be ready to go. There's only one key per system, not per terminal, but per system, per site. What we generally do is install the key drivers on any terminal so that if something happens and we need to move the key to a different terminal, a terminal crashes or a USB port goes bad or anything like that, we can, if we have these drivers pre-installed, we can move the key and just change some configuration settings in microcell without having to worry about installing things. There's also, once you do have the driver installed, there's a verify key program. We hit this verify key, and it will either give you a success or failure message checking for the key just to see if it's attached to the terminal. So to go along with the key drivers, we have a license folder, and you will have a license file in here in addition to this little document that kind of walks you through licensing and setup. Talked about those two. So then the last three folders are different files we use for different interfaces. Poll display files, all the different poll displays that we've actually integrated to that we know the configuration settings for we have in here. Again, we just copy the one for the actual manufacturer we're using into microcell, and then those settings are available inside microcell for us to just pull down from a drop-down menu and select without having to type in the numbers. So if there's a poll display that you don't see listed in here that you're using, we'll try each one of these first, because a lot of poll displays have emulation modes to emulate each other. If one of these works, we'll just create a, copy the file and make a new name for it so we know which one works. If we don't have one here that works, then we may ask you to send us the poll display for us to kind of evaluate and check here, or if you have a technical contact there that can give us the codes, we can try it remotely and just play with the codes until we get it display correctly. Same thing with the printers. We don't actually use the printer driver to print. We use these escape codes to format how we're sending text to these different printers. So again, a lot of printers, most printers have an escape POS emulation mode, which is what these default Epson codes are that we have in here. So, and then these WAV files are just different sound files that we've created. Most of these were for our kiosk mode to give on-screen prompts in addition to voice prompts, or voice prompts in addition to the on-screen prompts, to help these customers navigate through ringing up their own order and paying for their own order at these self-service kiosk terminals. So that's just kind of a quick overview of the tools that we'll give you for installation. Again, we recommend that you just like this, make a folder on the C drive, copy the entire contents of this flash drive or the CD to that folder, and that way you have all those tools available whenever you need them. Any questions about any of that?
I don't think so. Seems straightforward enough.
Good.
Now, is there a difference between, obviously, one computer is going to hold the data centrally, so is there any difference in the way that you install the central terminal as to the other ones?
Any difference in the way what was the last sentence you said?
In the way that you would split one in.
Install it? No, as far as the way, not for the installation, they'll be configured differently, but everything will be installed the same. We'll install microcell, we'll install the key drivers, everything so far would be done the same on every terminal.
Okay.
So once we have microcell installed, we would go to, like you said, one terminal is going to be the file server. We'll start at that terminal, and we'll go to configure it because, or actually we'll start at the terminal where we're going to put the hardware key, which oftentimes is the file server. Most often will probably be the file server.
Right.
And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that this first terminal with the hardware key shows that it's licensed, because that has to happen before any of the other terminals will be licensed. And you'll see the license status of the microcell terminal up here in the right-hand corner. You'll see the name of the terminal right here across from it, unless it's in demo mode, and then it will always say demo for the name of the terminal. There are basically 3 different license statuses, well, 4 license statuses you can have. We want to always see the word licensed here at an end user site. On a dealer's computer, we want to see dealer copy demo only. That means that I have a dealer license installed here, which still gives me all the functionality that I need to show the software. It just can't be sold that way. The other 2 remaining license statuses you could have are days remaining mode. So we're going to start off in the license status. If somebody takes the hardware key off, then the terminals are going to go into a countdown mode starting at 30 days. And every day it'll count down from there, 29, 28, and so on. So they'll have a month to determine that there's a problem with their key, contact the dealer, and resolve the issue. So that it'll show that countdown mode every day for 30 days. Once it goes past that 30 days, it's going to go into demo mode, and that's the 4th configuration or the 4th mode that it can be in. Demo mode is just what it says. It's only going to allow them to do demos. All the prices are going to be $1. There's going to be no communication with the remote printers. It's not going to send anything to the kitchen or the bar, and it's not going to share data with other terminals. So it truly becomes a standalone, orphaned, dollar store terminal. So that's why we give you the 30 days. So we do want the end users, when you install it, to be aware of that license status, and also to be aware of the hardware key, where it is, and how important it is that it doesn't go home with anybody. We'll oftentimes take the precaution of just taking a zip tie and zip tying that hardware key to whatever computer there. So it's not unremovable. Someone could easily clip it, cut it, and take it, but it kind of makes it a little bit harder. They're not going to just take it and walk away real quick. Some other things on this ID screen that will tell you kind of a status of the system, some identifiers. Down here in the bottom right-hand corner, we're going to have the version number of microcell. So if you're calling us and asking us how to do a particular function or telling us about a problem that you're experiencing, we'll often ask you the version number so that we can get a frame of reference to what functionality you should or shouldn't have normally. If you're using SQL databases instead of Access databases, there will be an SQL flag here. So it's just meant to be a quick identifier, and it's more the absence of that SQL that is the flag. If we know we've set up all these terminals to use SQL databases, we always want to see SQL there. If we don't, then we know that a terminal failed to connect to the SQL server when microcell started up, and so now it's running in a standalone mode so that it doesn't lose any data. It's just storing it all locally. Now, the good news in that situation is that the daily closeout that they're going to run every day is going to look at all the terminals for any of this orphan data like this, and if it finds any, it'll sweep it all back in. So they're not going to lose anything, but we want you to be able to look right on this ID screen and see the status of things. So if somebody walks up and sees it doesn't see that, they can just at least restart microcell or restart the terminal to see if it will reconnect and resolve the issue on its own. Otherwise, they can call for help. Down here, we've got our information. This is customizable. You can make a little text file that will put your information down here, phone number and website. This $$ is actually the name of the user on this computer that we're logged in Windows. So you can easily tell if all the computers are logged into the correct user account in Windows or not. We store some settings in the Windows registry, so if they change users, they may orphan those settings temporarily until we log out and log back in under the correct user account. Or if we resave the settings under the other user, then they can switch back and forth, and it won't make a difference. And then the last thing here at the bottom is you see users 1 LIC3. This means the license file in this system is licensed for 3 total users, but currently it's only this terminal itself, this demo terminal, is only communicating with itself. We haven't configured it to talk to the other 2 terminals yet. So that's normal right now because we know we haven't changed anything. In a fully configured system, if it was a 3-terminal system, we would want it to say users 3, license 3, so we know that all 3 of the terminals are communicating. If microcell starts up on a terminal and it looks for its friends that it knows about and it can't find them, then it will do what we see here. So if I couldn't talk to POS 1 and 2 from this terminal, it would say users 1, license 3, and this message would change. It would say registers failed to load, and it would list the terminals that it couldn't communicate with. So it's kind of trying to help you identify where the problem is. This banner here is configurable. If you wanted to put your dealership logo here or the end user's logo here, you could do that. And this background is also customizable. So you can have tailor things to match their color scheme, their logos, things like that. You have the time and the date. These buttons are kind of optional. They won't always be here. Just depends on the configuration. We have our time clock button, manager menu button. The site name and address will be listed here. And then these will normally show the daily specials. In this case, since this is the demo that's installed, we've put the information to kind of tell us which demo we're looking at here. This specials can be printed if they just click on here. So if they do enter the daily specials, the servers or bartenders can just print out a quick copy of it to keep with them when they go to the tables to explain the specials. They can program different specials for each day of the week ahead of time, and it will just change at midnight and start showing the new special for the new day. Any questions about this front ID screen?
I don't think so.
We just like it to be a nice, helpful tool, so I like to make sure everybody knows all the different things they can see here. So from a brand new install then, if we were to install this, and this is our first terminal, in order to set up the licensing, we're going to go to the Manager's menu. We're going to go to Register Setup, and we're going to go to the PAS Terminal Setup. And the first thing we will do is we will go to System PAS Setup, and we will find this location of key, and we will set this on the terminal with the key. We will set it to be local. So we can just hit this button here, and it will put a local path. On the other terminals that don't have the key attached, when we go to set this path, what we will do is either browse for a terminal on the network or type the name of the terminal. And then when we hit this button for the key path here, it will actually write that name for us. So we could type it here also. But you can browse for any of the terminals on the Windows network, and it'll populate the name here so that you can fill in these other boxes.
Now, what does the key, does that mean the USB dongle?
Correct.
Okay.
So all the terminals...
Sorry, you're putting in the terminal name of the computer with the dongle in it then?
Exactly. All the terminals will have the software license file that matches with that key, but only one of them obviously has the key attached, so we tell all the terminals where that is exactly. So in this case, I would hit local and hit save. And then what we're going to do, in this case, these will both say local also. It's not going to let me save these this way because we're in demo mode. We're going to do it this way. So those would be local because this is going to be our file server. We have two basic paths that you see here, and there's kind of a hidden path. And the paths are called this: data path, server path, common path. And really, when we say path, we're just talking about terminal names here, because what we're going to do is share the microcell directory so that we can path things to terminal name and then the share name of microcell. So let me show you what I'm talking about here using one of those utilities that I talked about. I'm going to go to C Program Files microcell, and I'm going to find a file called setpath.exe. And when I run this, it comes up and shows me actually 4 paths. We've kind of discontinued one of them: server path, data path, common path, and backup path. The data path is always going to be a local path, C Program Files microcell. This is where the local directory is, where we load the menu, pricing information, employee information, the local register options that tell us how this particular terminal is set up and configured. That's always going to be a local path, C Program Files microcell. On the file server, the server path will be local, the common path will be local. The difference between these two paths, microcell uses the server path to store sales-related, primary sales-related data. The common path is used for kind of peripheral data or shared data that when we can't store it separately. And it'll make a little more sense when we start talking about quick service and full service configurations. Do you guys, the type of restaurants you'll be working with, will they be primarily full service or quick service or a mix of both? Oh, we don't know yet?
Yeah, quick service mostly.
Mostly. So as a quick overview of how we would set up these two different types of configurations, quick service or full service. In full service, that's the easy one. You want your servers and bartenders to be able to use, well, especially servers, any terminal in the building, because they don't want to be tied to one terminal. They want to use the closest one to ring up orders, because they're, especially in the server's case, not usually using a cash drawer. They can close their checks from any terminal, so there's no reason for them to be tied to one terminal. So we would make the server path and the common path all point to one shared file server. We're going to store the credit cards, the call-in orders, the sales, everything, time records, everything on that one computer. The difference in a quick service environment, we want the orders to be as fast as possible. And in a quick service environment, there is generally a cash drawer assigned to each register. And we start a sales audit at that cash drawer for one particular employee. That employee isn't going to go bouncing between cash registers because he's got one drawer right there that's his responsibility. So he's going to take all of his orders there. The other main difference between quick and full service is in full service, we're going to start a check, add things to it, print it. When the guest pays them, we'll close it. But we're going to keep that check open the whole time the guest is there. In quick service, we generally will ring up the sale and take the payment right away and then give the food to the guests to either eat there or take with them. So in quick service, we still want to have one credit card batch. We still want to have one set of time records so anybody can clock in and out at any terminal without having to go to the same terminal. But we might have each terminal store its own local sales information so that we can speed up the communication. We're not tied into, we're not forced to look across the network for sales information. Also, if one terminal goes down or is turned off or anything like that, the other terminals can keep going, keep working, helping the guests. In a full service environment, if one terminal goes down, as long as it's not the file server, they can use any of the other terminals already, so that's already kind of built in there. So in a quick service like a McDonald's, we might set up each terminal to have a local server path, but then have a common path pointing to the shared data file server in that case. They will still, for be able to consolidate all the reports from any one of the terminals. So if they do a daily closeout or just a sales report from any of the terminals, it will consolidate all that data and print it all on one same report. But we'll try and keep the network traffic down in a quick service environment. Now, all that being said, it is still fine to use one shared file server for quick service systems, such that they're not sharing their data locally or storing it locally. They're using that shared file server. So I hope that doesn't confuse you too much with the way we can configure things. We have a lot of flexibility, and then, of course, there's the complex situations where we have a mix and match of quick service and full service systems in a installation. Those are not as frequent, but they're not rare either. A lot of big entertainment centers or bowling centers, things like that, they tend to have a mix and match of the different types of configurations. We will go in, we'll look at the actual configuration as far as quick service, full service, and all those different options. We'll look at that a little bit later on too. But is the basic, do you kind of understand where I'm going with the basic difference between quick and full service for microcell?
Yeah, I think so.
It'll make more sense too as you start setting the systems up and whatnot. And then this backup path we don't use anymore. We've kind of merged. We used to have a backup path where we stored historic data. We've merged all that into the common path now. So this will just be local. If you run this file down here, this will be local, or it'll have a different terminal name. So this is how it would look if we were to run this set path out of the directory. And this is what it would look like if I had those local paths there. Now, if this was not the file server, if this was a different terminal, we would see the terminal name here. And then when I came to the set path exe, what I would see here would be and this would just actually say server if we were to run this program. So if I were to configure the pathing like this in microcell, this is how it would look in the database or if you ran this utility. So again, the reason I show you this kind of like this is I want you to understand we share the actual microcell directory, and then we just reference the terminal name where we're looking for that shared folder. So // server / microcell, and we always want to see an n / here when we run this set path exe. All right. And then kind of the last main thing to set up as far as what we call pathing, we want to tell each of the terminals about all the other terminals in the system so that they can look out for each other. When we start up microcell, we want it to look for all the other terminals on the network so that if one is off or locked up or has any sort of a problem, we will see that. Somebody can alert a manager, and the manager can alert tech support if it needs to go to that level. Or they can just go check that terminal out. Maybe it got turned off. Maybe it got unplugged from the network, something like that. So we'll go here to the remote register setup, and we will tell this terminal about all of the other terminals in the system. We don't put the local terminal's name here, so it's just all of the other terminals. So if you have a 3-terminal system, you'll have 2 remote usernames at each terminal. It would be all the other 2 terminals. And we use these tabs or these remote register names to save menu changes, to save price menu employee updates. We also use these, like I said at the beginning, when we do a daily closeout. These are the computers microcell is going to look for to see if there's any orphan data, and it's going to use and pull all that into the main data sets so that it can be consolidated on the reports. So it won't hurt a whole, it's not going to hurt the system to not put these tabs in here, but it won't be able to look for this orphan data. It won't know where to find that data or where to look for it. That's reasons we want to set those remote tabs up. If we are going to use SQL databases instead of Access databases, we have a SQL setup screen here where we can set up a backup in a primary SQL server, login information. Two other things that we'll talk about here are sales transfer and a file transfer. If we have, say, a patio terminal that's not always used, maybe only used on the weekends or something like that, we want that terminal, when they do use it, to have the most recent copy of the employees and the menu and pricing and so on, without them having to do anything to that terminal except for turn it on. So what we can do is we can go to this file transfer. We can put the name of a terminal here, the file server, the back office terminal, or any other terminal in the system. And when microcell starts up, it will go to this terminal, and it will pull the common files from that terminal to the local system. So it'll pull the menu databases, the employees, the discounts, and the system options, which includes the sales tax and the access levels, the job titles, the things that are the same on every terminal. So when microcell starts up, after they turn this terminal on, it will automatically pull the most current data in and then be ready to be used. This sales transfer works similarly, but kind of in the opposite direction. Let's say they have a banquet terminal, a banquet room, or a party room or something where they use a terminal that's only used for like an hour at a time, and then they're going to put it away in a safe, secure location. They don't want to leave it connected to the network. Well, if they're ringing up sales locally on it, what we can do is we can set a terminal name here so that when they close the sales audit on that terminal, it will transfer its sales data to this other terminal. They can shut this mobile terminal down, put it in the room where they keep it stored, and know that the sales are going to be included in all the reports for that day because we've already posted them to some other terminal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Those two functions, this one, the sales transfer, is pretty rare. Most people do not use this. This file transfer is fine to use on every terminal. If you want to point every terminal to the back office or the file server, then when microcell starts up, it's going to just pull those, each time pull the fresh copy of those files. It takes an extra 30 seconds at the most. That's basically the pathing. So the last thing we're going to really talk about, and I say that as though it's going to be very quick, but it's not going to be, are the register options. Button there, if you notice, says register options by terminal because these options are terminal specific. We set these options up at each terminal because each terminal, we could want it to run a little bit differently than other terminals. And we have some basic configurations. Again, the two most basic categories we lump all of these into are quick service and full service. And again, the defining characteristic is, are we going to keep the checks open and add to them and then print them when we want and add more to them and then close them when the guest is ready to leave? Or are we going to take the money at the time of the sale? On these screens, we have some quick configuration buttons too. If I go to this quick service, you'll see down here we have some default buttons. Quick service counter, quick service drive-through, quick service back office. Same thing in full service. We have some default settings. What these will do if you click one of these is they will go through and put some check marks in, take some check marks out, and fill in these custom options with some default settings that we think are a good starting point for that style of configuration. You then would go through and add anything else you want to add or take anything off that you don't want to use in your specific installation. So these are good starting points for you. And definitely we will help you with any sort of questions you have about how you think, any suggestions that we can give you on how we think it should be configured for you. Some other things to look at on these screens, you can actually right-click options, and some of these are blank right now because we're filling them in, but a lot of them will tell you how the feature works and how to set it up, what's required to set it up. So we'll be populating more of that as time goes on so that you'll have more answers there without having to look in the manuals or call us. So keep that in mind that you can right-click some of these options for descriptions on how they work. Going back to our quick service versus full service, because if you call us, we may ask you, is it a quick service system or a full service system? And we're really asking you, do you have this check mark set system to quick service? Because that's what determines whether we're going to allow you to keep the checks open or whether you're going to take the payment at the time of the sale. Now, there's a lot of flexibility in this customization, even with those kind of rigid descriptions there. we can actually, in a quick service system, allow you to keep tabs open temporarily. So say someone is in line, they take their order, they place their order, and then they realize they left their money in the car. You can push that order to the side, help the rest of the guests that are in line while that person goes to get their money, and then when they come back, they don't have to place the order again. You can just recall the order, pay it, they can pay for it, and then they're done. It's not truly like a full-service environment where we can keep that check open, print it for the guests, they can sit there, keep adding to it. It just doesn't give you all that full functionality. So those two are the basic configurations. Quick service, take the order, take the money. Full service, take the order, add to it, print it when you're ready, take the money when the guest is ready to pay. A third configuration that we have is what we can call our centralized check closing or cashier environment. And what this is, places like, I don't know if you're familiar with Denny's or these places where they have a server waiting on the guests at the table. The server gives the check to the guests when they're done eating, but the guests go to a cashier station to pay for the order. So what we would do is we would set up some terminals as open-only stations, wait stations, for the servers to use to take the orders. And then we would set one or more terminals as cashier stations as open and close, where they can take payments and call-in orders and walk-up orders, to-go orders. We then have a kiosk configuration, which is more, where we've seen it used mostly is in like hospital cafeterias, so that either the employees of the hospital or the guests at the hospital can either ring up their own order and pay for it with a gift card or a credit card, or they can get their food, slide it down to a cashier station and pay there. We won't go into too much detail with that because I don't know if you'll be focusing on kiosk configuration. We also have a back office configuration that's compatible with either the quick service or the full service modes. And mainly what it does is gives you a different view of the reports on a dashboard screen when you first log in. And it just shows you some report status in addition to some pie charts to make it a little friendly screen. And that back office kind of gives you a up-to-the-minute status report on sales, voids, discounts, labor. We have handhelds that we can use with the system. So these would be either PDAs or tablet PCs. The way our functions work right now is these PDAs use terminal services to connect to a Windows server machine, and microcell runs on that Windows machine a separate instance of microcell for each PDA that they're using. So they would want to make sure this machine is a little bit beefy enough to handle multiple, remote terminals if they're going to have multiple PDAs. The screens obviously are smaller on this PDA, so we've got some different functionality here to try and help facilitate making those screens look nicer and different functions that they need to do there. So they could literally pay at these PDA terminals, and if they have little mobile printers, they can print receipts right there also. Now, generally speaking, we're going to set these options up for a particular terminal. Wait station is going to be different from the bar terminal, is going to be different from the back office terminal by various check marks based on the functionality that we want. Let's say they only have one terminal in their store. They have a very low budget. They're kind of low volume. They don't want to have multiple terminals. Whether they can afford to or not, they're just not going to buy multiple terminals. But they want to have the terminal be configured a little bit differently when the bartender uses it, or when the server uses it, or when the manager uses it. We can also do that. What we would do is we would turn on this option, enable options by job title. They would have to use our time clock, so that's the only way microcell will know what job you are doing today is if you clock in and pick a job title. And what we would do is we would save these settings with the word none here, and that would create a default set of settings. This is how the terminal will operate for people who do not clock in. So it would be kind of a very high restricted setup so that it wouldn't allow them to do anything since they pretty much probably forgot to clock in. Then we would go to each individual job title that we want to have different sets of options from the default settings. So for bartender, It'll tell you have no options set yet for this job. So we click OK, and we take our default settings that it saved, and we just change that based on how we want it to be for the bartender. So now if a bartender is on the clock and they log into microcell, the screens will be a little bit different. And if a server logs in or a manager logs in, they can have their functionality readily available to them. And the last thing we're going to talk about here with these options, well, not the last thing, but the ways to make these options, to send these options out to other terminals. Let's say you have a 10-terminal system, and they're all going to be bar terminals. Well, there's no sense in going to each of the 10 different terminals and setting these options up. Number one, it takes too much time, and number two, if you miss one setting, that terminal is not going to operate the same as all the others. And then you'll have to try and trace down which one check mark you didn't check or uncheck. So there's an easy way to do that. Number one, we can set this terminal up exactly how we want it to be, save it, and then we can export the options. And what it will do is it will come up with a list of all those remote locations that we set up in the pathing. And we just put check marks in these boxes, save options, and it will export those options to those terminals. So those terminals are now configured the same as this one. Second way we can do that is in this drop down here, we will also see a list of all the other terminals that we set up in those remote register locations. So I can switch to a different terminal, and I can look at its settings or change its settings. So you could literally sit at the back office and change all 10 of the bar terminals or make changes to every other terminal in the system. And the other way we can do this, every time you save these register options, whether you export them or not, every time you click this Save button, microcell creates 2 text files. And they're going to look like this, but they're not going to have the word export there. They're going to have the register name there. So it would say register name checkbox options.opt and register name data options.opt. And these just are all the ones and zeros are all the check marks, whether they're checked or not. And the data options are actually the filled-in information from those drop-down menus. We can take these 2 files, copy them into any other terminal in the system, start up microcell, go to the Manager's menu to register setup, database utilities, and there's a window here that says Restore Register Options, and it will list all of these OPT files here. And what we can do is click on one, and it will ask us if we want to restore the options from that file. We click Yes. Now, if we do the checkbox options, we want to do the corresponding data options. And so now I've loaded the settings from another terminal that easily here. What I recommend people do is what we do here is we stage the systems in our office. We fully test everything to make sure it's working. That way, when we take it on site, if something doesn't work, we have eliminated a lot of variables about what's wrong. It's got to be something that's on site or one of the cables or something's failed. But it helps us to determine that everything was working first. We know we've got some other problem that's developed. So when we're done staging the system in our office, we will, of course, have the menu files we created for this customer. We will take these register options OPT files from each register after we've configured it, and we will put those with the menu files. So we'll end up with 2 menu files, and then we'll end up with register 1's OPT files, register 2, and so on. So if they call us and say it's Friday, it's 4:30, we just had a terminal crash. Can you please bring us the terminal right now? We need it for this weekend. It's going to be really busy. Normally, you might think to yourself, there's absolutely no way I could get this terminal ready, let alone to them in a half an hour to an hour. In this case, you could. If you have their version, their installation files, you can install microcell on a brand new terminal. We've got their menu databases here already. We've got these OPT configuration files, so we can fully configure this system the way it left the building the last time, bring it on site, and it'll be 95% configured. You just have very little time spent configuring it on site because you know you've started. You know you're at this starting point where it was from before. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. So again, it's really difficult for us to direct you on what options you're going to want to use and not want to use until we've talked to you about how that site runs their business. We have some quick service restaurants who run in a full service configuration for microcell because they like the ability to keep checks open and things like that. We have some full service restaurants who kind of run terminals in quick service mode because they want to take the money right away. So there's a lot of flexibility on how this can be set up, and if you have any questions about how you think you should set it up, definitely let us know, and we'll help evaluate it with you.
Question.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've watched how you export the options over to the different other workstations. You can select which one you want to export the options over to. Can you also export that to a file for reuse on a different site?
Yeah, so these OPT files, I mean, you could in your office set up default bar configurations, default quick service configurations. I've used these when I was doing demos before. If I know I'm going to show certain specific functionality, I can set this up ahead of time, save those files. Here's what you can do. Every time you come here, you click Save, it's going to create files with that name. So now we go to the microcell folder, and I have these two files. I can rename this to default bar. And now I can put these somewhere on my system. I can even leave them in the microcell folder on my demo machine. And every time that I come back into this screen here, it's going to show me all those files that I named. So you can literally make all sorts of different configurations, pre-configurations that you want, and be able to load those. And even if you don't, it may not be the final configuration, but if you make some default bar, then you'll know it's going to start in a bar configuration, and you may go turn off one or two options, turn on one or two options, and yeah, you'll be good to go. So yeah, these OPT files have a lot of kind of uses for them, making backups of the systems, rebuilding systems, exporting, configuring them similarly. So yeah, lots of uses. I don't think very many people make good use of this tool. Just because I don't know.
Because pretty much all of the restaurants we're going to be setting up in this pizza chain are pretty much going to be exactly the same, like 3 or 4 workstations, and, the same kind of printer setup and everything. So it's probably it's going to be well used.
Absolutely. No, that's why I go over it kind of in the beginning, and it might be that might be part of the problem. I go over it in the beginning, and there's so much to learn that people forget about it. But certainly keep that in mind, and if you need any help with using those files or making them or whatnot, just let me know. We have some simple, quick reference sheets too on how to create these and make use of them. So yes. A few of the other basic setup things we'll look at. That was kind of basically the basic overview. Some other things. We have a kind of a catch-all here: tenders, paid outs, customer requests. It's where we kind of customize a lot of different of the setup items. This is where all the tender names are created. If we're going to use credit card and we are interfaced, we're using a direct interface, we've got check marks here for the different functionality. House accounts is linked to our house accounts, or internal gift cards. We can do gift cards through third-party credit card processing companies, or we have a built-in gift card function. Some of these others are just a way for them to list the names of their paid outs, the different job titles they want to use. Server tip fee chargeback is for making the servers pay the credit card fee on their tips. So some different setup items here. We may direct you here to set up some different names if you're asking us to do that. I'll go over basically how the access levels work in microcell. When you're setting up employees, we give the employee their first name and last name, and we give them an access level and an access number. Those are the only 4 pieces of information that are required for them to use the system. Now, if they're going to use the time clock, we also have job titles down here that we can assign to them so they can clock in and out. We can put pay rates or not. It's going to assume they're hourly. They're going to be checked hourly by default. If it's a salaried week rate, we just uncheck the hourly. If we want them to claim tips when they clock out, we mark it as a tipped position, and then when they clock out from either one of those job titles, it'll ask them to claim their tips. So what I've done is we've given Billy, the bartender here, bartender access level. It's similar to job titles, but it actually, the only thing that's similar is the name. Since he is a bartender, as far as access levels go, bartender is set at access level 2. We have all different access levels in here. Microcell has 10 different levels, but you can create as many different names and assign them to a number as you want. The levels go from 0 to 9. Level 0 is time clock access only, so prep people, cooks that aren't going to ring up any orders in the system, they would get some sort of access that would give them 0, just time clock. And level 9 gives you full access to everything in the system, and we named that supervisor. So then there's all sorts of different levels in between, and they're really just customizable. By default, we have set assistant manager at 4, manager at 8, but truly, most people don't make use of but 2 or 3 different access levels out of the 10 we have. And the way those levels work, we go into the system access configuration. On the left here, you'll see different screens. So we could go to the order screen, and it will actually load the order screen, and then we can actually pick different function buttons and set an access level that's the minimum level you have to be to use that different function. If you set it to level 10, nobody can use that function. So if there's a button you don't want people to use, we just set it to level 10. That locks it out for everybody, though, managers, everybody. So if they decided they wanted to use it, they would have to come unlock it before they'd be able to use it. And so keep in mind, like, to get to the manager's menu, you have to be a certain level already. By default, level 4, assistant manager. So when I'm going to this manager's menu to program any of these buttons, I don't need to set them at any level higher or lower than 4 because you already had to be level 4 to get to this screen. Same thing with register setup. Our screen, in order to exit out to Windows, you have to go to the manager's menu and then register setup, and then there's an exit to Windows button. So we've built these like this so that you can kind of make the access levels flexible enough that you can allow assistant managers to do what they need to do but not do more than that. So most of the buttons on our different screens have access levels you can assign to them that people have to be at least that minimum access to use that function. As far as sales tax goes, we just have a straight sales tax rate. You can name the sales taxes. If they have multiples, you can name them, city tax, state tax, and so on. You can enter tax tables if they want to use the tables to control the rounding. Some states require it. I think it's optional in some cases. But what you would do is just start entering the table information, and once microcell sees the pattern and recognizes it, it'll give you a message that says table is complete. Just save it, and you're done. We also have special tax tables here, and the main reason we added these is for places like Ohio and Canada, and probably others, but those are the two that I know for sure have some unusual tax configurations. If you're using the special tax, we can make different types of order destinations exempt from tax. So we will not tax drive-through orders with this tax table or so on, so things like that. So we have some flexibility with taxing that we can set up there. Credit card setup, again, we can link directly to some processors, or we can use NetEPay or DialEPay to connect with all the different nationwide platforms via NetEPay. We've got interfaces to gift cards, or we can do a internal gift card program that's kind of linked to our house accounts. If I go to the manager's menu, I have a house account function. So what we can do is we can set up either employees or customers as house accounts, and then they can charge food to their account and pay for it later. You can either bill them on a regular cycle, you can store credit cards and charge them regularly. different functions there. It's tied to, the gift cards is tied to our house accounts because we just make it a prepaid house account, so they have to put value on this account before they can use it. And then we'll look at some peripheral device setup here. Printers. When we install printers, we encourage you to install them, name them in Windows, something related to their function or their position. So if it's a kitchen printer, name it kitchen, bar printer, name it bar. That way when we come here, it makes it a little bit easier to configure microcell, because what we're going to do is we're going to select a port name in Windows. Well, if we're not using the parallel port or the serial ports, pretty much everything is going to get an any virtual port number. All the USB ports, all of the Ethernet ports are going to have these, or any shared network printers that are attached to other computers. So it's a little bit harder to set up if you don't know which order the printers were added to the computer, because that's going to be the order that the port was made. But what we can do is just select the first one. If we know we're setting up the receipt printer, all I have to do is page down through these ports until I get receipt showing up here in the device name, because this is the Windows name of the device. So once I have that set up correctly, I can click Save, and now I know my receipt printer is good. Same thing here with remote printers. I can select bar, and I can just go through these printers one at a time until I find where my bar printer is. In this case, I'm using the receipt printer for that. We can have up to 2 cache drawers per terminal. And so what we can do is we generally will attach the cache drawer to the printer. So we just select the printer name here. These are the codes to fire the drawer from a printer. So if we're using other types of drawers, then we may need to change these codes and set the different port here. We do support serial cache drawers, but oftentimes they have to have their own separate power supply. And they certainly use different codes here if you're going to use serial cache drawers. We can load a logo into a thermal printer so they can print their logo on the printer when they generate receipts. This printer escape codes, this is where we go to set up the codes to format the text for each of the different types of printers. They may have different models of printers for the receipt or the kitchen, so we have the ability to set up different sets of codes for each one. And again, this is where we will find our list of all those codes if we copied them from that CD. So what we can do is select the kitchen printer, find the type of printer we're using down here, and then I can do save codes to printer, and now it will load those codes. Attached devices, this is where we would set up all the other peripheral devices, the scale, kitchen video system, coin changer, liquor control system, caller ID box, label or ticket printer, printing labels for maybe delivery orders. Drive-through order display, there's a confirmation board we can set up so they can see the orders outside. Sometimes people are using surveillance systems and they want to send the items that are being rung up at a terminal to the camera that's watching that terminal, so that when someone reviews the video later, as they see the bartender making drinks and ringing things up in the system, it actually shows on the screen what they're ringing up, basically like what a 2-line poll display would show you on the back of the terminal. So we can send that text output to this camera system. And then we have a Verifone set up for a pin pad. Poll displays, similar to those printer files, we've got all the different poll display files, so we would just select the manufacturer that we're using, select the COM port where it's attached, and then do set active. Kitchen video IP setup. We have 2 interfaces to kitchen video. One is through microcell, and one is to QSR. We're currently going through the certification process for QSR, which we hope to be complete very soon. So that's kind of the basic overview of the setup. Did you guys have any specific questions or further questions? I don't like to give you too much information before you can start using it because you don't want it to leak out.
Right. That's the thing. I think obviously it's not all that complex, but there's a lot to it, and I guess it's easy to maybe forget 1 or 2 things. So I think we'll probably end up, just playing with it ourselves for a while before we attempt to do an install, just to make
when you do have an install you're ready to do, if you stage the equipment in your office first, we'll be happy to connect to the system and look at it with you and make some recommendations. Oh, that's good, that's bad, that's perfect, whatever. So keep that in mind when you're ready to do that first install. We'll be happy to go over it with you.
We'll probably do that. We might even stage it on. We've got a lab computer which is like an i7 with 12 gig in it. We might sort of simulate 3 or 4 workstations and.
Exactly. Yep. Well, good. Well, that's all I have for today. So if you guys don't have any other questions, then class will be dismissed. I thank you guys for attending.
All right, appreciate it.
And can I get an email address from you guys? And what I'll do is send you a few of the quick reference guides to start with.
Okay. Do you have mine?
I'm not sure. I could probably get it from Ken, but I was just going to jot it down if you have it handy.
Okay. It's SLUBY, that's Sierra Lima Uniform Bravo Yankee.
Yep.
At mscns.com, Mike Sierra Charlie November Sierra.com.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you guys again. You guys have a great day. We will talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.